Hi, I'm Emily from the Wisconsin Cheese Mart, and today we'll be talking about drunk cheeses. What used to be a traditional European practice to preserve cheeses with extra wine has turned into actually a very rich culture, especially in Wisconsin cheesemaking. We have everything from wines, beers, even some bourbon, and we actually have a cheese with tequila in it as well. So lots of different alcohols represented in these cheeses with varying levels of flavors, but a nice variety as well between them. There's not a whole lot of history known around why, someone would incorporate wine into a cheese, but if you think about it, the sum of its parts is greater than its whole. Wine is great, cheese is great, let's put them together, and we've got a great cheese. Same goes for beer, bourbon, anything you like. So the first cheese I'll talk about is actually a proprietary cheese for us at the Wisconsin Cheese Mart. It is the Coffee Stout beer cheese. This cheese is made with beer from Lakefront Brewing Company, which is a local brewery. In fact, all three of our beer cheeses include breweries from Wisconsin, 2 of them in Milwaukee. So we have the Lakefront Brewery Coffee Stout, which I'll talk about in just a moment. We also have the Nitro Rye Stout from Three Sheeps and the Milk Stout from Milwaukee Brewing Company. So this Coffee Stout beer cheese is obviously a very visually stunning cheese. This actually gets the way that it looks due to the cheese making process. So when cheddar cheeses are made, the curds are actually pressed, turned, pressed again, things like that. But for these curds specifically, obviously they were actually soaked in beer during the cheese making process. And you can see where the individual curds were because the outsides all got that nice brown color, and then they were pressed into this nice cheese form. And since it is a young white cheese, it will be semi-soft, nice and firm when you go and cut into it, but it will retain its shape, and you can tell right there the marbling does in fact exist throughout the entire piece of cheese, which is really nice, especially if you are aiming to use this cheese for any kind of visual presentation. Obviously it goes beautifully on a cheese board just because it is so striking. As far as its taste, it will pick up quite a bit of tasting notes from that beer that's in there. Because the white cheese is very young and quite mild, it basically just serves as a vehicle for the other flavor additives that are in there, the Coffee Stout. And because it is a darker beer, a stout style beer that is incorporated into the cheese, you're going to get very rich malty notes from that addition of the beer. There will be a slight chocolatey flavor because of that coffee addition. If you've ever made chocolate cake, you usually add some coffee and it bumps up the chocolate flavor. Not sure what the science is there, but the Coffee Stout adds a nice little note of chocolate to the cheese. As far as how I would use this cheese, as I mentioned before, it would be very beautiful on a cheese board just because of its beautiful color and the way that the curds were pressed. But I think because of that rich maltiness, it would be really great with maybe like a backyard burger, any kind of red meat. It would be a good addition to that. You can just plain it and put it right on top of your burger for you on a cheese board, but obviously you also can't go wrong with just grabbing some pretzels and a nice full-bodied dark beer and enjoying them together. If you yourself are from Wisconsin or if you've ever shopped for cheese here, I'm sure the next cheese we'll cover will be one that's familiar to you. It's the Bellavitano Merlot. It's such a popular cheese. It's very well selling just because it is such a good cheese. The entire line of Bellavitanos, obviously with that Merlot soaked rind, it does get a very beautiful color on the outside, but the flavor and the taste that are in there are really interesting. So this Bellavitano Merlot will have a bit of a different texture than most of the cheeses we'll see here today, since the Bellavitano line is described as basically a cheddar parmesan blend of sorts. It does actually have almost the same texture as an aged cheddar would, so it will crumble with the forked end of a cheese knife into nice big crumbles. And obviously you will want to eat that Merlot soaked rind. That's where a lot of the flavor is going to be. The addition of that Merlot will actually add some nice flavors as well, obviously. Mostly you'll get plum flavor and a little bit of berry. So it will incorporate well into like this slightly tangy, crumbly, salty cheese, and it will all come together to form a really nice, very well-balanced cheese. The way that I typically like to eat my Bellavitano line of cheeses, we have the Merlot here. They also have Chardonnay and raspberry tart ale, so both wines and beers. But the way that I would eat something like the Bellavitano Merlot would actually be on top of a salad. I think it would go very well on something like maybe like a seared salmon salad. It's a lot of S's, but I think that that kind of berry plum flavor would play nicely with a really nice, well-cooked fish and maybe some nuts on a bed of mixed greens. I think that would just be so well balanced and a really nice way to eat your cheese. The next cheese we'll dig into will actually be the Maker's Mark Cheddar. So that will be a nice light young cheddar with the addition of Maker's Mark Bourbon. So this cheese may not look like much. It looks just like a plain young white piece of cheddar, but with the addition of that bourbon, it will actually have a nice additional flavor there. So it is a young cheddar. It has not been aged that long, so it's going to be semi-soft. Really will keep its shape when it's cut into like that. Really, you can't tell there's a lot going on in here. And once you've cut into this young cheddar, it will be quite subtle, the addition of the Maker's Mark there. It will have a little bit of woodiness, but mostly, more than anything, I taste a little bit of nuttiness. So more nutty than your average young cheddar with the addition of that Maker's Mark, but it is still really accessible, especially if you don't like bourbon or dark brown liquor or anything like that. This cheese will still be delicious to you. The way that I would recommend using this Maker's Mark cheddar would probably be to incorporate it into some type of meat. I would say eating it alongside a brat with some coarse mustard would be great. More than anything, I think I'm just hungry, but I would like it on a brisket sandwich. I feel like that kind of really unctuous meat with this nice, slightly nutty young cheddar would be great. And then of course you've got some Maker's Mark on the rocks off to the side, I'm sure. The last cheese we'll cover is actually new to us here at Wisconsin Cheese Mart. We're very excited to have it. It will actually be a Chev cheese. So that's a fresh goat milk cheese. Comes in nice cute little logs. It's the Maple Bourbon Chev by Leclaire Farms. So since it is a Chev, this will be a fresh goat's milk cheese, so it will be quite soft since it is still a fresh cheese. So when we go and cut into it, it's just gonna kind of squidge out a little bit since it is so nice and new and really delicious. It won't really hold up to rings that well unless it's maybe right out of the refrigerator. As you can tell, it's kind of crumbling a little bit when you put some pressure onto it, but it is such a good cheese. If you like goat's milk, this isn't as forward as, say, an aged goat's milk cheese because that milk just kind of gets even more powerful as it ages. So since it is young and still pretty fresh, it will still have a nice bit of tanginess to the flavor of this cheese. Obviously, the addition of Vermont maple syrup will have a nice sweetness added to that nice young tangy cheese. And the bourbon will add a nice little woody finish to it as well, similar to the Maker's Mark. And since it is a nice clean cheese, I would really just like to let this cheese speak for itself. Since it is still young and spreadable, what I would do is actually take a nice little piece of baguette, spread it right on top, maybe with like a slice of pear and some flaky sea salt. Since the cheese itself is pretty sweet with that addition of the maple syrup and the woodiness of the bourbon, I think those flavors will pair really well together, and maybe with a bourbon old-fashioned cocktail off to the side. That sounds like a great Friday night. Thank you for joining me as we looked at a few of our drunk cheeses that we have on WisconsinCheeseMart.com. Please feel free to let us know if you've purchased any of these cheeses, how you like to eat them, what you've noticed as far as their taste. You can also leave a review on that product page on WisconsinCheeseMart.com directly. Let me know what cheese you've ever had that has had the strangest addition of alcohol in whatever its form. I would really love to know. These are all pretty basic, but all still very delicious. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.